Rob, thank you so much for being on the Programmatic Digest podcast. Welcome to this episode.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So, before we dive in and what's new and what's happening with AdButler, I wanted to see if you could introduce yourself to the audience and tell us a bit about your experience on this fantastic ad tech space.
Fantastic is an interesting word to describe the space we're in. Yeah, I'm Rob Janes. I'm head of product over here at AdButler. I've been doing this now for close to a decade. Yeah, so I run the product development teams as well as the customer facing teams like support and engineering. So that's my role here. And that includes everything from, all of our programmatic connectors to our direct deals and all the fun stuff in ad tech. So that's what I do. Yeah. And a decade feels like forever in ad tech.
I 100% feel you. I've been working in programmatic for 10 years already, and it just feels like 30. And essentially, I just call it fantastic because I feel like this year in particular, and I think this is a great segue to like start talking about some of the things that you guys are working is um, some of the changes and things that we've been seeing this year, especially on the publisher side. So I've worked a lot on that part of the space. So it's really interesting to see what are like some of the biggest challenges that we're facing this year, like especially after all the core updates from Google, a lot of like the traffic going down. I think most of the publishers are facing these challenges also like the migration of the users from search to AI tools. So
Yeah.
that's a huge item. So I wanted to understand if you've seen something similar with your clients. What are like some of the challenges? Let's go into that.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there. So I guess first, yeah, let's start with some of the challenges that we've kind of seen. You know, the very first one that comes to my head, it was kind of like we did a complete about face in the industry, but I mean, for going into like early 2025, not even 2026, but 2025, there was like everybody was on this thing of, hey, cookie deprecation is going to happen. We need some sort of identity resolution. And it was like Google with the carrot on the stick, dangling in front of us, going, oh, we need identity resolution. Then, halfway or near the end of 2025, they're like, oh, by the way, we're not going to do that now. And everybody's like, all right, fine, okay. So, I mean, um, I did see that a lot of publishers decided to go and start building up some sort of identity resolution internally, which was really cool because the industry just needed that anyways. So from that we saw massive growth for like ID5 and UID2 and things like that. So I think that's really cool. Our publishers are interesting because the customers that we work with, I'd say it's a split down the middle where they do a lot of direct relationships. So a lot of our publishers have direct relationships with brands. So they have a sales team and they close the deal directly, or they have a self-service portal, right? So they let advertisers come in and buy directly all via self-service and they pay by credit card and stuff like that. But then the other half of our customers do rely heavily on the programmatic space. So, we'll take the ad request. And the nice thing about having an ad server, right, is they have the benefit of not being married to one SSP. They can go in and say, look, how well is Magnite comparing against, Cargo or anybody else, right? And things like that. So, there's certain benefits to that. Challenges they faced, I think it's not just specific to our customers, but every publisher is having this existential crisis right now of like, well, like a couple of years ago, there was this, the buzzword of like made for advertising sites, right? And it was just people that putting out sites and there was all this MFA. And now people can just produce so much content and people are consuming content differently than they were before, right? I'm one of them. I used to go to Google and search everything, and now I chat GPT or I Claude everything. Or I'll go to Google and I'll just read the AI summary. Like I'll type in my problem statement and I'll get the summary and just rely on that. And I can't remember the last time I actually looked through the list of websites and went to a content website. And I'm like, this is really interesting, right? And I think this is a problem that kind of everybody is is facing not just publishers, but anybody that produces content online, right? Um, I don't know. I don't know how people are solving for that yet. Um, you know, as a tech company, we're looking at things like conversational prompts and how do you get LLM visibility? Um, and how do your ads respond differently if they know if it's a an AI looking at your site, versus a human, right? The interesting thing with that is it's very unless you have some sort of layer in front of your site, you don't know whether or not it's an AI. Because an AI, especially if you look at like Claude Cowork or other things, it controls your browser or it looks just like a human, right? So you need to then have some sort of software in the front to say, and I know Cloudware has a solution for this, and there's others, but they're like um, basically tracking, is this user a real user? Is it an AI user? And then because the AI user doesn't necessarily care what color the ad was, it's more about the content, right? Um, so it's a very interesting time to be alive in the publisher space. I could honestly go on for hours about that because just the whole AI thing is a really fun space to be in. Um, so I think there's that, right? Like we're hearing that from our publishers right now, right? We're hearing from our customers. They're like, hey, what's the plan for monetizing AI agents coming to the site? I think that's one of the biggest things we're asked about right now. If I think back in the last probably 2 months, they're asking, okay, well, how do we make sure that the ads that we're showing on the site, an AI thinks the ad is beneficial, right? And that's a fun one, because it's a lot of back end stuff, right? That's a common thing we're seeing. The identity thing is another thing we're seeing. Um, and I still find there's some other things that have just been around forever that people are still seeing, right? They just want to know, like, hey, how do we maximize, our CPMs, right? There's things that have been a problem, not a problem, but it's always like, how do we maximize the amount of money we're getting as a publisher, right? So it's, ad blockers are still a thing. Another thing that I feel is quite common is, and again, it goes back to AI, but you have these AIs scraping your page and getting your content and then not getting any money from that, right? And I was at a conference, I can't remember when, but fairly recently with the IAB, and they were talking about, I think it was an Ad Monsters conference, and the IAB were talking about, well, you know what, publishers should start charging these crawlers for scraping their content, and this is just another revenue stream. And I was like, that is a genius idea. I'll pause and see if we've aligned on anything.
No, 100%. I think there are like a few ideas that you threw there that are fairly on point. So of course, like I when I said fantastic spade, I hope my sarcastic tone was caught up because yeah, I feel like I spent the last 4 years talking about cookie deprecation, and everyone was like super alarmed about it. And so before that, we had the introduction to at 16 solicitation, which also changed a lot of things
Yeah.
for the publisher. And now we're talking about AI, which is, of course, it's a complete revolution that it's not only across our space, but like most of the jobs. But what it comes to like it's what it relates to like what we actually do, it is exactly that. So just trying for publishers to figure out how to protect their content, how to be more unique, where the things that people would necessarily need to go to your site or app to find this
Yeah.
content. And so it's really interesting to see that versus the fact that now most of the content you can do it via AI. So
Yeah.
that's the part of the coin. And of course, like one thing that it's going to be like very interesting is the marketplaces that are going to appear in ChatGPT. I think like they're already like introducing some ads, and probably Claude
Yeah.
will get there. I haven't read any news yet, but I'm pretty sure that it will get there. So I know we're not going to solve this on this episode, but I just love to get your take on it, because I feel like a lot of publishers sometimes like feel frustrated about just like seeing their traffic and users decreasing for month over month, and there's a lot of like pessimistic sort of seen on or like seen on the future, in the near future, at least. I don't know if like it's just my perception, but I think it's important to talk about this in like the episodes, or people that are listening that are publishers, that this is something that's happening globally. We are also seeing a lot of the advertising dollars shifting, because we are expecting like a lot of events, for example, this year, and maybe some agencies are not spending as much as we should. Have you seen like any similar trends there?
Yeah, a little bit. Honestly, not it hasn't been as like such a red flag yet where I think we're all kind of preparing for this idea. Like publishers are seeing traffic decrease and things like that, and they're preparing now for AI the same way we prepared for cookie deprecation, right? But I don't think it's necessarily at the point where like the Titanic has hit the iceberg yet. It's just we could see the iceberg ahead of us, and now is our time to pivot, right? So I think that's kind of where we're at in terms of looking at things as an industry. What I kind of tell my publishers now is uh your your audience doesn't necessarily go anywhere. They're just consuming your content a little bit differently, right? So you still have your audience. They're going to consume your content a little bit differently. Will they actually go to your website and look at the news articles? Maybe. You're going to have some followers that absolutely do that. You've built the biggest thing here is like your brand awareness, your authenticity, your thought leadership, right? As a publisher, as an example, like we work with Dexerto, right? So if you're in the gaming space or the nerdy space at all, or the movie space, like they're a big one, right? And they have the kind of their own SSP and things like that. I mean, people are going to continue to go there. They have this following, right? And for them, it's okay, well, how do we take this and kind of build their own sort of quote unquote media network around it, right? You know your audience, you can monetize that audience. That content is still going to get consumed elsewhere offsite, right? So on one hand, you want to take care of the visitors that are loyal to you and religious to you because that's great. They're going to be your kind of your bread and butter, and we don't want to leave that astray. In fact, how do we take those people that are still coming to the site and not just monetizing on site, but once you start building up that profile of that user, hey, maybe we can monetize those offsite, through Trade Desk or whatever, right? But then also, okay, then there's the content piece, right? So it's publishers are saying, okay, well, if my content is going to get consumed elsewhere, and this is what I was touching on just a little bit ago, is there are initiatives coming out now, and I'm trying to remember. I think it was Scott Messer, from Messer Media, and he was saying like publishers really should find solutions where they can monetize the content. So not running ads on site per se, but if an AI agent is scraping your site, then you need to be able to go back to Anthropic or OpenAI or someone else and say, hey, you know what? You scraped my page for this content, and your AI agent gave this content to this user. I didn't get a chance to monetize that user from them coming to my website, but you're still using my AI content to, or my content to consume that. So you need to pay me for that, right? I think you're going to see a lot of that happen in the next 3 to 6 months. I hope, right? Like that's my hope for publishers. If you're going to make the content, then publishers should be able to make money off of that content. Maybe it's not the traditional way of just advertisements and ads, right? But if you're still producing the content, now you just have an AI consuming it and showing it somewhere else. But those publishers should still get paid. So I honestly do think, the next 6 months, you're going to see a lot of these little new startups happen, which allow publishers to have a new revenue stream of saying like, hey, your AI learned from my site. You owe me money for that.
Absolutely. And I think it's the first time that I've heard of this. I did saw like some of the products that are being developed to like start charging to the scrapers. So
Yep.
I'm 100% aligned with you. And like for the people that are just listening, we just cross fingers together, Rob and me, to like hopefully that this will be something that we will see on the near future. So thank you so much for sharing that from your conference, and some of the things that we're probably going to see this year. At least we're going to start speaking more about it. Now, going back to AdButler because I'm really interested to learn more about
Sure.
some of the things that you guys are doing. And for anyone that has been living under a rock, I wanted to know more about like what are like some of the services or things that new products that you've been launching. If you could like summarize that.
Yeah, I mean, I'll do the quick 30-second, 3,000-foot pitch just for anybody who doesn't know what AdButler is. I won't blame them if they've been living under a rock, to be honest. So we're not great at marketing ourselves. We're a really cool engineering company with some really amazing ad tech. And if somebody gave us $1 million, we'd put that into their developers that build something really cool and then completely forget to market it. So that's kind of where we're at. That's what you get when you have a bunch of engineers running the company. But we have a full suite of ad serving solutions. So, ad serving being, display, video, email ad serving. Basically, if you run ads and you uh, want something better than Google Ad Manager, you'd come to AdButler. Now, what we've released now fairly recently, I mean, there's a ton of stuff, right? We have a lot of retail customers as well, which is really interesting. That kind of picked up in like 2019. We started getting some retailers in. So we launched a new, what we call Commerce Catalyst, which is just a UI UX, kind of like an order like an operating system specifically for retailers, lets them manage their on-site ad serving, but also connects to OMS platforms and sends their data into like Snowflake and Databricks and so forth. So we did that for retailers. What we've done recently in the past month, maybe 2 months now, again, because AI is the buzzword, we launched our agent skills and our agent MCP. So if you're using Claude or Cursor or whatever the case is, you can interact directly with your ad server, from your AI from Claude, right, or from OpenAI. You can simply, point our MCP server to it and say, how well is my campaign doing? What campaign is performing best? What changes should I make? And it goes in and it looks at all of your historical data. So now, a lot of that operational management where you would have an ad ops or a rev ops person go into your account and look at your stats. Now you can kind of offload that to an agent, right? So directly with prompts, and then you can set up cron jobs or whatever and just make it do it. You could come in and say, hey, every hour, look at all the campaigns that are running and increase the bid floor to make sure that the one that with the highest CTR is the one that's showing up the most, right? So we've built the MCP to kind of allow that. And then the other thing, obviously, I think doesn't get enough talk is self-service. I mentioned a little while ago, but uh, I have found in the last 6 months, maybe a year, maybe even longer, um, self-service, just people being able to buy ad campaigns without needing a sales team, right? So if I wanted to run an ad on, a local news website, I would have to go and talk to them and negotiate a deal. And now it's as simple as saying like, hey, you know what? Here's the link. Click on this to buy your ads with us. They open up. They can put in their credit card details. We want to make it as simple. People are so used to running ads on Meta, on LinkedIn, on Facebook. It's super easy for anybody to run an ad on Facebook, right? But if I want to run an ad on a local newspaper in my city, right, or something like that, how do I do that? Well, I have to call them. I have to figure it out. I have to email. There's a lot of back and forth, and it should be as easy as booking on LinkedIn or Instagram or Facebook to run a campaign in my local news, right? It should be that easy. So we've kind of built this, portal builder where people can create their own self-service marketplaces without having to have all that, sales overhead. That's kind of like the biggest things we've done. I'm sure there's other stuff I'm forgetting because I'm not much of a sales guy. I'm a product guy, but yeah, I think those are the kind of the biggest things.
Amazing. No, those are great things. There are like three things um that caught my attention. I would say the first one that I thought it was really interesting is like your specialization in retail publishers, because I can think of like some of the challenges that they would probably have with GAM. So I just wanted to see if you could like in case you have like a rundown of like what are the like one or two features that are like specialized for retail, because this is the first time I hear about this with an ad server. So
Yeah.
yeah, that'd be my first question.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, retailers have this interesting space, and it's not just retailers. It's beyond that, right? There's a lot of startups that'll come along and say, "Oh, retailers are different. Traditional ad tech won't work for retail," and that's not true. In fact, it's quite the opposite. Retailers are now just discovering problems that traditional publishers figured out 10 years ago, right? So, an ad tech was purposely built to solve these problems. And I'll die on that hill arguing with people. But anyway, I mean, with especially with GAM as an example, right? Um, it's the outcomes that retailers are trying to achieve, right? Slightly different. It's not about the impressions and the clicks. It's more about, okay, the relevancy of the ads. Does that actually result in more sales, right? So it's not just a matter of like, hey, throwing a bunch of ads on there. I will cave a little bit in some of my previous statement and say traditional ad tech in the way of Google Ad Manager really doesn't benefit retailers specifically, because it's not performance driven campaigns to the fact of like, hey, which SKUs, which products in store or online are selling the most. You can't go into Google Ad Manager and take all of your sales data from your brick and mortar store and then take your online sales data, marry it together based on household or user ID. And then when that person comes back shopping on the website, show them display ads or show them product ads based on, okay, you know what? We know you were recently in the store and bought these products. Here's relevant products you should probably buy next time you're online. Right. So that's a use case that you just won't be able to solve with Google Ad Manager. Now, traditional publishers don't necessarily have that problem, but they have similar problems. It may not be selling retail products in a store, but traditional publishers or other publishers, they may have like sponsored listings. When I think of there are tons of like marketplace or community sites, things like that, where you know traditional just throwing impressions at things doesn't really get you anything, right? I mean, it's great if you're selling if you're just charging your advertisers based on CPM, right? And you're just selling on CPM basis things. But if you're especially if you're a marketplace or e-commerce, having objective based delivery as opposed to just volume based is almost a necessity now. Then the other piece of that is just the audience data, right? I've found retail media networks kind of kicked off in the last 3 or 4 years. And now everybody's kind of pivoting to these media network ideas, right? So owned media network or commerce media networks. We see it now with airlines. Airlines are starting their own media networks. And basically, and not even that. I think Marriott, I can't remember who it is, but I was at a conference, CES. I was at CES in January, and one of the hotels. I think it was Marriott, but don't quote me on that. But they were like, it's the first ever hotel media network. I was like, everybody's starting a media network now. And then when we started to look at it, we're like, well, realistically, this is stuff publishers have been doing for a long time, right? Just they're calling them media networks now, but you're essentially saying, hey, we have an online property or a website. We're taking in data from other places, and then we're building targetable audiences, and then we're basically saying, hey, come to my media network, and I'm going to give you the best offer on site and the properties I own. Plus, I'll let you target my users offsite across the open web somewhere, right? Um, yeah, it was a long-winded answer to a very short question.
No, but I appreciate so much the detail on what you explain, and also your take on this, but because I think it is rare coming from like traditional publishing to see like what are some of the challenges in retail, because it I mean, you explained really well that of course it behaves different, and the way users interact on retail is a bit different, and it would definitely make more sense to just target ads that are probably more relatable to the things and products that they're seeing, other than, for example, with traditional media, where we are probably just targeting this user because of their past behavior or the information that we have stored in the cookies for them. Then it can 100% be not accurate either. Like, to be
Yeah,
honest,
exactly. I mean, retargeting isn't going anywhere, right? It's still probably one of the biggest ways of doing things out there, right? But it's taking, and I try to tell this, like, it doesn't really matter what size of a publisher you are, whether you're a big publisher or even a small publisher. If you have a platform, especially if you have a site where people can log in and sign up, right? The more data you get about your user, the better experience you can have for that user, right? As long as you get consent, obviously, right? But the better if you have a logged in platform. When you talk to most people aren't upset with ads. They're upset with bad ads or ads that are not relevant to them, right? I hate or if it or if it's just a poor experience. Like you go to the website, there's so many ads appearing that the website runs slow and bogs down the computer, I'm immediately closing that tab. And 9 times out of 10, most people will say the same thing. But most people aren't, they're not afraid of ads. They just, ads are a part of life, right? Is it an okay experience? And are what they seeing relevant to them? Right. So, if you're just going to go online and you just see a random, Google AdX ad that's completely not relevant to me, whatever. I'm not going to click on it. I'm going to ignore it completely. It is what it is. But if I know who that user is and I have a really good tailored experience and the ad that I'm showing them is really relevant to what they do, whether it's browsing the internet and they're being retargeted or hey, I'm a news website and I know Rob's recently been looking at finance stuff. Let's show them some ads from the finance world, right? That becomes a much more realistic. Realistic is probably not the right word. It's a much more enjoyable user experience.
No, absolutely. And I'm super aligned with that. I have to say that the other
Contextual
day,
all the way.
contextual. And we have a few minutes and I wanted to talk a bit more about the case use that you mentioned regarding I call it ADCP, but you called it another name. I'm still learning about all these new words. Uh, Ad context
Yep.
protocol, that's the one that I learned very recently, but you called it a
Yep.
different name. And I think that's one of the big product releases that I've seen with a couple of tech companies. And so one of the things that struck me and that I thought it was really interesting is what you mentioned on the fact that how easy it is for users or like yeah, users to like just get ads on like social media platforms, but with programmatic, it's just like rocket science. Like you have to go into at least DSP. It's the most
Legit.
horrible UX UI in the world. I
Yep.
don't know why no one has changed that for like 20 years. And
Yep.
so I think it's like really interesting in the fact that of course like publishers are going to have more control and just more direct like what you mentioned of like not having a salesperson and just a user being able to buy ads on your site or your app. That's really exciting and it changed a lot the fact that for example, with local news, where, for example, if you're a small business and you want to just put your ad there, like just going to an agency for program, it like doesn't make sense. So this opens, of course, like new revenue streams. So yeah, that part.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, the AdCP, that's a really interesting one. So it's funny because there's AdCP is really cool. It started as this like community-led thing. I think Brian Kelly, I think that's his last name, over at Scope 3 started, this contextual protocol, which was basically saying like, hey, this should be a standardized approach when you want to do, basically automate automate's not the right word, but use AI to do that media buying process, right? And then there was a seller agent and a buyer agent. Um, and then the IAB also have their own agentic protocol now, which is kind of accomplishes the same thing, but in a different channel. So it's interesting. I'm not really sure. Yeah, because everything can be done and it's so commoditized, everything can be done now very quickly with AI. I suspect, most tech platforms will just support AdCP and the IAB's version of it. But it's meant to just kind of streamline that process. So when you're, because eventually it'll get to a point where agencies, I don't think agencies will go anywhere, but agencies will rely heavily on an AI agent and they'll say, hey, you know what? Here is what I'm trying to do for my client. And the agent will just go out and do the media buying on their behalf, right? There won't be this idea of this convoluted, really old, archaic DSP. I'm hoping that kind of dies with these AdCP protocols coming out and so forth, because then just an agent will just be the one, the computer will be the one to have to go through that painful UI, right? That's kind of the hope and dream there. But yeah, I mean, it's a perfect time for that self-service thing, right? Really, realistically, Meta did great, right? Meta Ad Manager, LinkedIn Ad Manager, being able to run things there is super easy. And that's what, like me as a product guy, I want to bring to every publisher. It's basically, hey, if someone wants to buy an ad on your site, it should be as simple as they go to your site, they click the advertise with us button, and then they choose which placement, right? Literally just like a map, they say, yep, run it on top of the homepage. Here is, and the publisher gets to set the price of what they want to sell it for. And then they just pay by credit card and that's it. They just start making that money, right? As quickly as that. And then they can set up approval flows if they want to, right? So you make sure that nothing wrong shows up on the site, right? But so that's what we've really focused on. The really interesting thing that we've done, as much as we're an ad server and we would love to replace Google Ad Manager, we have realized that just a lot of publishers are married to Google Ad Manager. So on one hand, yes, we want to compete. On the other hand, we know that it's very hard to move off of GAM. So the self-service APIs and the self-service dashboard that we built, you can use on either our ad server or you can use it on Google Ad Manager. So if there's a publisher still using Google Ad Manager that wants to open up their own turnkey self-service very quickly, you can still use our platform to do it. And that's the end of my sales pitch. But that can still be done. But I think that's, that should be something. If a publisher isn't doing it already, they should greatly consider it.
No, absolutely, and thank you so much for mentioning. Yeah, I think it's really important for the audience that is listening to us and like they're completely married to Google Ad Manager, maybe guilty. We have like the option to just try these new platforms because in the end, there's so much what a publisher can do with all the new technologies, identity solutions, and now we have to
Oh,
build these agnetic agents. It's like that's a lot. So that's great to know
it
that
is.
AdButler has a great solution.
Yeah, yeah. Again, I just we know that people. It's very hard to switch your ad tag. Like it's different when people. Some people when they're buying stuff online, they're very quick shoppers. They know what they want. It's not often that you change your ad server, so it's not every day that someone's going to change the ad server because it's a lot of work, right? So then we were like, okay, well, for the people that don't want to change their ad server but still want to have a very easy self-service to make it super simple, right? Let's open this up to everybody, even using GAM. So that's what we did there. But so yeah, I would say that's kind of the number one thing is self-service. And then yeah, in the programmatic space, because this is the programmatic digest, it's very interesting because I do think agents are going to be that process of the buying and selling, right? I think at some point you may not even need an agency. The next version of what we used to call ad agencies is probably going to be a bunch of AI agents. You go to an AI, like an agent agency, and you say, here's what I want to run. And those AI agents are now the ones going out and buying deals across DSPs. They can check it every minute or every second and get you the best yield at different places. So I think where agencies used to have a lot of manpower invested into, the rev ops, that's just going to be agents now. It's just going to be AI. And that's the world we're headed.
Absolutely not scary at all, but like it's the world
Right.
and it's the one we're living in. But I feel like we don't have to panic. Like we already panic for a lot of things, and like
Yeah.
I know things are gonna get solved. But anyways, Rob, I
Yeah.
appreciate so much you being here. I could talk to you for hours, honestly. This has been such a fun conversation, so I really want to thank you so much for
Thanks for
being
having me.
here. I think we've learned a lot about AdButler, and for anyone that wants to contact Rob, we'll left all the details on the podcast description.
Perfect. Thanks so much for having me. It was a pleasure.